Hello, this is going to be a walkthrough of the structure, the general structure of how how N-tier programming works. Works the same in Java. I mean, it's implemented a little bit differently, but it works the same in Java as it does in .NET. Um, there's some pluses and minuses to it. It's a bit more complicated, but it's like one of those things. If the work that we do now is going to pay dividends in the long run, almost guaranteed. So you've everybody's seen the presentation layer projects where you have a website or an ASPX page or a JS page. Well, this data's got to come from somewhere. Now we can write the data access layer, the data layer, in the same project. Sometimes people get really messy. They'll just write straight up SQL statements in the action script of pages. Problem with that is it's untestable. Number one. Number two, it's difficult to debug. It's not reusable. There's 1,000 different reasons why you would split those layers. So I split the layers into the sort of the generally accepted methodology. So what I did was first, let's assume that these two presentation projects, VolTeer and Skills, are not going to have any data access at all. In other words, any data served to these things are going to come from somewhere else. I don't want a connection string in these guys beyond the authentication connection string. I don't want it connecting to the database at all. The connection to the database are done through the middle tier projects. So let's close the presentation projects for now. I've got a folder called middle tier projects, and within the middle tier projects, I have class four class projects. Excuse me. Business logic layer, contracts, data access layer, and domain models. So let's work from the top down. Domain models, and I created one for skills. The skills, and I just have a table out there. Here's a table under the VolTeer database. I have a simple table called skill, and under that I have columns skill ID, skill name, and master skill ID. I have master skill ID as a foreign key to skill, so this is sort of a recursive entry. But I just wanted to keep this simple. I've got three columns in a table. I've got no store procedures yet, just plain old three columns in a table, and I want to hook that up um, to my domain model. Okay, so first of all, my domain model, simple. If I look at my domain model, I've got an int for a skill ID, a string for skill name, and an int question mark for master skill ID. The question mark is a shortcut way of doing a set and get when you're dealing with null values. It knows how to deal with a null in case it's an integer. This is not just an integer thing, it works with a lot of different data types. You see that a lot in dates. Anyway, let's close this guy. The next layer up, is the data access layer. So the data access layer, I actually have what's called an EDMX, an entity domain model. Uh, let's see if I can do it a different way. Let's go back to. There we go. Okay, so I have skill is an entity domain model. I hate saying that over and over again. Notice I've got my three columns. If I wanted to change skill or add new domain models, tables, or store procedures, it's pretty much pretty easy to do. That's a later exercise, but imagine I can have my whole domain model described right here. This is sort of like kind of like Hibernate. So anyway, so this is the domain model. Within the domain model, within the data access layer, I've got skills.dal. Skills.dal has a simple procedure called list skills. List skills, and it's going to return a list of skills in the domain model. And if you look, it says list equals from results in context.skills. This is context. This is my context. In other words, the EDMX file that I described. And if you look at it closely, it sort of looks like SQL. And this is actually called LINQ. Um, the benefit of LINQ versus SQL is that this is bound at design time and not at runtime. So if you're missing, let's say I went out to the data model, and changed the column name, it would fail at compile and not at runtime. Trust me, believe me when I tell you can be 1,000% better than dealing with SQL at runtime. You can do where clauses, sums, everything that SQL could do, you can do in LINQ. I just wanted to give you the LINQ idea. It's going to return a list. Now, the presentation layers aren't going to reference the data access layer directly. The data access layer is going to be referenced by the business logic layer. So in this case, skills.bll, I've got two methods in this, and the other one I had to implement because I'm using an interface out of the contracts. Anyway, this one is just blindly returning the list skills. If I wanted to, though, I can implement a business rule in this layer. A business rule that would be, let's say, specific to this business layer and not something that I wanted to enforce on the database. Let's say there was a data rule, I wanted to enforce it on one layer but not another. I would do that in the business logic layer. In this case, I'm just blindly returning list skills, which comes from the data access layer. So and then the last one is contracts, and contracts is just the interfaces. So I have an interface for skills, and my interface says I have a method called list skills with no parameters, and I've got a method called list skills, and I'm going to pass in one parameter called start letter. So this is just an example. If I wanted to, let's say, pass over the letter A and return return a list of skills that all begin in the letter A. This would be the second method I would implement. I've already got the method stubbed in the data access layer because it's enforcing this interface, but it's not doing anything. It's just throwing a non-implementation exception. This is the way you can stub a method. All right, so let's I'll close these up again so we can see it. From the view that you have from the presentation side would see the business logic layer. The business logic layer references the data access layer. The data access layer uses the domain model and contracts and the EDMX to get to the database. Pretty cool. So let's take a look at the references just to prove this out. If I go to skills and I look at my references, I'll go to the add reference. Add reference. If I look at my projects, it's referencing the business logic. I don't want to screw around and put, in other words, if I could put the data access layer, but I'm skipping over the business logic layer, but I want to have that rule that says I'm only going to look at the business logic layer. If I look at the data access layer, I like doing it the other way. All right. If I look at the data access layer through add references, I see that it's using contracts and the domain models, and it's not using the business logic layer. That's good. The business logic layer should be looking at all three, the data access layer, contracts, and domain model. And then the domain model is sort of the top class. It doesn't look at anything. That's got to exist before anything else exists. Awesome. So get this. It looks pretty complicated. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 projects. When things get deployed, what goes, what stays, how does it all work? Well, it's smart enough to know that skills depends on business logic, which depends on data access layer, and then these two. So this will drag along all of this when it gets compiled. That makes sense. So this will drag along all of this when it gets compiled. Skills and VolTeer are two separate projects. So this doesn't depend on skills, and skills doesn't depend on VolTeer just yet. VolTeer will probably end up depending on skills because we're going to be using a control or at least a few controls that are built in skills in VolTeer. Right now I don't have any dependency. So let me see what happens if I say build this solution. When I build the solution, it's going to compile everything, all four of these in the right order, and compile the skills in VolTeer. Now what I expect to see is under my projects, if I can find it, let's see, it's under dead. I'm dead. Repos. Come on. I'm going to pause for 1 second, dig around for it. Hold on. There we go, I found it. Sorry about that. Under VolTeer, well, I got some garbage out here, so I wanted to rename these in the right namespace, so I called them VolTeer dot. So let me get rid of this, excuse me, business logic, contracts, this guy, Let me zap those things. Clean it up a little bit. Okay, here we go. So business logic layer, contracts, data access layer, skills and VolTeer. I still want to have in their own. So I want to have in their own folder. So let's look at skills. So skills, when it compiled, all this stuff was in the skills project. And if I go to the bin of skills, I expect to see all my DLLs. So get this. Here's VolTeer.contracts. Here's VolTeer.data access layer, VolTeer.domain models, VolTeer.business logic layer, and plain old skills.dll. Cool. So these are, if you consider from Java days, this is all the jar files that are going to be pushed over. Same with VolTeer. If I look at VolTeer, and lo and behold, there are all my my DLLs. So when it comes to pushing this thing, when I go to actually deploy, if this was all completed, all I would have to do is right-click VolTeer, push to AWS, which is our build or deploy machine. Excuse me. Okay, I'm not making any changes. I already have VolTeer out there. There's nothing new with VolTeer. I don't have to do anything with the RDS. And I'm going to click deploy. It's the first time I try to deploy this with all the dependency. In other words, all that middle tier nonsense. And it's doing an incremental deploy. It's probably going, oh my god, he's changed so much. Let me make a whole bunch of changes. It's added all the DLLs, so that business logic, contracts, data access, and so forth. Modifies these two guys. Restarts the service. You know what? AWS is not bad. Pretty easy stuff. Let's see if I can do this in 2 minutes. I'm going to try to deploy skills, which has never been deployed yet. So I'm going to deploy a new in the Elastic Beanstalk, call it skills, don't change anything else. Create a new environment for this. I forget what I call the other one. I don't want to do this the wrong way. I don't want to hurry up. But I think I could just say skills.elasticbeanstalk.com, and it will serve out. There we go. Take a look at this AWS Beanstalk. So if I click this to view, let's see what happens. I get now. It's nothing sexy about this, but here it is. So if I look at it, let's see if I can log in. I had George Foreman as my user. This logs in, that means it's getting a connection to the database and my authentication is working. It's thinking about it. Let's see what happens. Oh, you know what? I still have an error with this. It's nothing to do with this deploy. I don't have the firewall set right on the RDS. If I look at it locally, it works. And then this is what it is. Okay, so this is nothing I just did. Don't sweat it. I'll get it fixed by the time you see me. Awesome. So let's go back to VolTeer. We've got all the middle layer stuff. We've got the 2 presentation projects, and now it's time to start building. I've got. Let's assume I fixed that other error. Code's been checked in. Time to start tearing this up. So the next case is going to be implementing our core use cases, which I think I did with the what do you call it, the ASP membership provider. This is looking pretty good. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in class. Bye.